Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a bit of a big night for us here. We've got kind of a milestone episode here to talk about. You want to delve into that?
Yeah. But before I do, I'll just mention apologies to anyone listening why my voice is so raspy, hoarse today. Battling a cold since Sunday. Thought I was over it yesterday, but woke up sounding like this. So not ideal to be recording, but we couldn't miss tonight because this is our 1 year milestone episode. This is going to be released, I believe, a day before 1 year anniversary of our first episode. Isn't that right?
I think it's something like that. Pretty cool. I didn't even realize it until you mentioned it. But
yeah, and how many episodes did we do in our first year? It was around 40, wasn't it?
41.
41,
This is episode 42.
42. So, awesome. So we almost managed to do one a week, which was a goal of ours. Obviously, we took a bit of a break during the off season, but we've managed to keep up a pretty good routine, which is great.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that because I think one of the things when you do a podcast, any podcast, is that you want to kind of have a consistent release schedule, and we've been pretty good about that. I think overall for the most part over the year.
Yeah, we usually release on Friday mornings. I remember when I was still driving out to Cochrane for work, I would always listen to our episode when I was commuting, and now I have to fit it in before I start working from home in the mornings on Friday. But no, it's a good ritual, and I hope that people have been enjoying it. We're excited to delve into more stories in our second year.
For sure. And if you are a new listener to our podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
So the YYC Soccer Podcast focuses on soccer in Calgary. We talk about soccer at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and we interview the players from the city's soccer community, all the way from the grassroots and amateur leagues and teams up to the post-secondary and even professional level, all with a Calgary focus.
That's right. And this week, we're going to not really talk too much about the current news. We're going to do a bit of a retrospective and also a look ahead. We're going to talk about what we decided, from our opinion at least, were the top 5 Calgary soccer stories of the past 12 months. We're going to look ahead into the new year at things we're going to be watching for and players we're going to be watching for in the new year. How does that sound, Scott?
Sounds like fun. I think we came up with almost identical top 5 stories. So excited to reveal what those were.
Okay, let's do the countdown, and we'll start at number 5 with our number 5 Calgary soccer story of the year. Take it away, Scott.
So our pick for number 5 was the SAIT Trojans women's team winning the ACAC title after a very dominant 11-1 season, thus returning them to nationals for the first time since 2021. SAIT had an incredible 2023, led by striker Megan Wiebe, who set a scoring record for the team. They had a similarly dominant run through the ACAC playoffs, winning the championship and returning to nationals. Didn't go quite as well for them at nationals as it did in 2021 when they made the podium, but still a phenomenal season for the Trojans and worthy of making our top 5 list for sure.
Definitely. When you look at their season, I think the only way you can really describe it is just dominant. They basically won every game by a significant margin during the season and then into the playoffs. They were a real powerhouse for sure. And as you said, it didn't end up in nationals quite as well as they would have hoped. But overall, I think you've got to be pretty happy with that performance. And I think it's definitely noteworthy and a good one to put in our top 5.
Yeah, they really had a good rivalry going with Lethbridge College in 2023. They actually both finished with 11-1 records and were the only teams to beat each other in the regular season. Yeah, but dominant is absolutely the word I would use as well. I mean, rattling off some of the scores, the Trojans in September of 2023, 15-0 win over Ambrose, 9-0 win over Augustana. Yeah, University of Alberta Augustana in Camrose, 8-1 win over Olds College, 4-1 win over Red Deer Polytechnic, 2-0 win over Medicine Hat, and then that only blemish at the end of September, that 2-0 loss to Lethbridge. But similar results in October. I mean, 8-0, 16-0, 2-0, 5-0, 1-0. I mean, their defense was unbelievable, and their strikers, their midfield, they were banging in the goals every week. So kudos to the Trojans coaching staff, John Tallarico, Jess White, who we had on our podcast, as well as the players for putting in a phenomenal campaign.
Definitely a solid year, and we'll watch with interest and see how the upcoming year goes, because I think they are going to have some turnover, as I think all college teams do. So
right on. So what was our number 4 story of our first year?
So our number 4 story was Maya Jones. Now, Maya Jones had really a fantastic 2023 into 2024. She played her final season with the University of Memphis Tigers. Their team went on a big undefeated playoff run, and then she ended up getting drafted and signed with the San Diego Wave in the NWSL.
Yeah, which is, of course, the team that U.S. women's national team legend Alex Morgan is the captain of. So she's going to have one of the best players of all time to learn from in at least this next season. So that's an amazing opportunity for Maya Jones. In addition to what you mentioned, she also had had a really strong season in the UWS with Foothills WFC until she got injured partway through. She was, I think, scoring more than a goal a game, really helping lead that team from the front. So pretty much, throughout our entire first year of existence, Maya Jones kept making headlines. She was one of the players we mentioned more than any other, simply because she was scoring goals, she was playing well, she was making waves, I guess you could say. So very exciting.
Funny.
Yeah, and you know what? She was one of several Calgary players to play for the Tigers, that successful Memphis team. She was the first, wasn't she? She was the first one to go down there and show what Calgarians could do in the NCAA division.
Yeah. So there have been 2 Calgarians that have graduated off that roster, but there's still 2 more left. So yeah, the Calgary connection at the University of Memphis will continue.
Yeah, and we can give a shout out to Grace Storty as well. She also played on that Foothills team as well as the Memphis team, and she kicked off her professional career with Braga in Portugal. So another success story. So our third biggest story of our first year of existence as a podcast would be League One Alberta launching. Now, technically, League One Alberta only launched an exhibition season in 2023, but it was still a very big deal overall for soccer in Calgary. It provided a platform that really didn't exist before to give high-level soccer players who are, 18, 19, 20, an opportunity to fill a gap between the university level as well as the Canadian Premier League, or UWS on the women's side. There of course is the Alberta Major Soccer League, which has been around for a very long time, and a lot of really good players have come through that league. But League One is a little bit different than the AMSL, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think the League One, it has a bit of a shorter season, but it's much more focused on player development, young players, and AMSL, I think, runs the gamut. There's some real veteran players that some of them are even former pros, but there's a real mix of older players, younger players, and some of the teams are really invested and committed more into player development. Other ones not as much. So I think the main thing I would say is that the focus on the AMSL teams are not always the same across the league, but League One, I think, is a little bit more all about player development and wouldn't you say? I think that's probably the best way to describe it, isn't it?
That's how I would describe it. Yeah, I mean, I watched a couple of League One Alberta games this past summer, and it seems like it's almost like a U23 Tier 1. If you think about, players who it was very much on par, if not maybe even a little higher of a level than like U Sports games. So it's great that the top university level players now can play at that level in the summertime as well as the fall. It's just a decent or a very high caliber of play 5-6 months a year now. If you if you combine those two, League One followed by the university season. So it really did, like I said at the beginning, it fills a gap. I agree with what you said about AMSL. AMSL is a great mix of young players who have finished their U17, U19 minor soccer career and graduate on to the top men's league. But yeah, there's also guys who are 34, 35, and they played at a really high level before, and they want to stay fit. But I think AMSL, it really does run the gamut. There's guys in their 30s, there's guys in their teens, there's squads that are essentially like collegiate or university teams preparing for their regular season. I played a little bit in AMSL like 12 years ago, and sometimes if you were playing a team from out of town like Lethbridge or Edmonton, they wouldn't really bring that many players, right? So they wouldn't have any subs or something like that. I don't know if it's still like that. It's been a long time, but no, I think League One is huge. Obviously, the inaugural competitive season is going to kick off in 2024. I believe there's 7 teams for men and 7 teams for women, so a little bit expanded upon from last year. Excited to see it. I think it's a really good thing to be able to offer in Alberta.
Definitely, and I think from what we heard from feedback from some people that were involved with the first year, I think the general reviews were pretty positive in regards to how it was run, the level of play. And I think it was really well run the first time around. And I think that they're just going to build on that this year. And as you mentioned, there are more teams being added, and all of the new teams that have been added are all Calgary-based teams. So Calgary Southwest United are entering men's and women's sides. The Blizzard is adding a men's side onto their existing women's side. And then the new National Development Center is going to be fielding a team as well. So that's the plan for this year. So a lot of Calgary connections. Last year, it was basically of the 10 teams, 4 of them were Calgary based. And now it's going to be of the 14 teams, 8 of them, I think, are going to be Calgary based. Okay, let's move on to the number 2 story that we have for this past year. And our number 2 story is Mount Royal University winning the Canada West title for the first time ever.
I thought about this potentially being our number 1 story of the year. In the end, it only makes number 2, but the fact is Mount Royal winning Canada West, that represented the first time since 1980 that a team from Calgary has won the conference. So it's an incredibly rare feat. MRU did it within a decade of joining U Sports, or just over a decade, I think, of joining U Sports. So incredible growth from them. It shows what Ryan Jackie has been able to achieve with that program. They had a great recruitment strategy in the last few years, which has really paid dividends. Yeah, I watched them play 2 games, and they're a very, very impressive team.
Yeah, I think that this is the culmination of the building of this program. And yeah, getting out there and beating some of those powerhouse BC teams. I think that's always the thing that tends to stop the teams on the prairies is those, UBC is always a powerhouse. They're always at the top, and they have the benefit of the better weather. And, it's hard to beat those teams. And the fact Mount Royal was able to put it all together, I think, is a really positive sign for soccer in Calgary in general. But I think that program in particular, they've built it up and really turned it into something special.
Definitely. And like you said, UBC is Canada West's powerhouse. I mean, they almost always win the conference. They're the Bayern Munich of Western Canadian university soccer. So MRU got the better of them twice in 2023, if I'm recalling. They beat them in the regular season as well as the playoff championship game.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in that championship game, very rare as well was the fact that Calgary got to host it. So MRU played UBC on their home field. You could see snow had been shoved off to the side. It was late October or something like that. So it was pretty cold out. and it was a tough game. I think it was 1-0, if I'm recalling correctly. But booked their first ever ticket to the national championships, which also went okay for MRU. I mean, yeah, even though they didn't medal or challenge for the podium at nationals, they still fared really well considering it was their first time there, and they are gonna move some players on this season. But I expect MRU to have a really successful 2024 as well.
Definitely. I think I don't see any reason why they're not going to continue to play at a high level. With university, college soccer, there's always going to be turnover, and you're always going to have some ups and downs. But I think what they've built there, it seems like there's still going to be quite a foundation left there. So
Yeah, and being as successful as they have been in not just 2023, but in the last few years in general, I mean, the fact that they're a winning program now means that, it's so much easier to recruit players because you say, look, we won last year. So why not come play for us? It's more enticing now than it maybe was 7 or 8 years ago. So MRU is in a great spot, and I'm excited. Even though they're not my alma mater, I was with the U of C, but I'm excited to see how MRU fares this fall.
for sure. Let's go to the number one story that we determined from the past 12 months. So, Scott, what was the number one story?
So the number one story was Cavalry FC winning the Canadian Premier League Shield, which is the regular season title, thus qualifying the team for the CONCACAF Champions Cup for the very first time. Of course, Cavalry's regular season in 2023 didn't get off to the best of starts. I believe they went winless in the first 6 or 7 games. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. was getting booed, but they turned it around phenomenally to the point where they finished the regular season with a double-digit gap ahead of Forge FC. So they won the regular season in 2019, but it was actually a little bit closer between them and Forge back then. 2023, I mean, Cavalry was far and away the best team in the league. And it's unfortunate that once again they came up short in the playoffs. An unbelievable match against Forge FC on October 28th. I still remember the date. Went to extra time, and I think 3 goals were scored in extra time, including an Olympico to win it. Despite that bitter kind of finish to the season, Cavalry's 2023 was awesome. You had Meyer Bevan banging in the goals. You had Ali Musi assisting or scoring almost every game, it seemed. You had Dan Klomp, seemingly never putting a foot wrong and en route to being named the CPL's MVP. It was just a great season for Cavalry.
I agree with everything you said there. It was just a really good special season. And I don't think either of us expected that after the first few games. The first few games were rocky, but it really turned around. And yeah, what a season. They just built on it. And even though there were player changes, they transferred out to go to Natigne and they brought in Willie Accio, and they just put it all together. And as a team, they had a pretty complete season overall, except for the playoff final. And can't be too disappointed. I think it was a pretty great season overall. And
yeah, definitely. You mentioning Gote Natigne, that transfer as well was a little bit of history in the making, because that was a CPL record of around $500,000. His transfer to FC Annecy in France's second division. All kinds of highlights from Cavalry's 2023 campaign. Of course, qualifying for the CONCACAF tournament meant that they got to play against Orlando City not that long ago, just last month. Obviously, that didn't go the way they were hoping it would, with them getting eliminated 6-1 on aggregate, but fantastic learning experience for Cavalry and for Tommy Wheeldon Jr. and his team. I think, with the additions to the roster this year, it should be another really strong season for Cavalry, and I'm sure they're keen on defending their regular season title, and for the first time in the team's history, finally winning that North Star Cup.
yeah, I think that's going to be the goal for sure, is to get that playoff victory and finally get that monkey off their backs. But pretty soon we're going to be putting together a bit of a preview for the Cavs season. But when you look at their roster as it stands right now, they haven't really lost a lot. If anything, they've gained. I think they look like a better team on paper right now than the team that they were at the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to see, have other teams made moves to catch up, or are the Cavs just going to keep staying ahead of the game? That's going to be the real interesting piece, I think, we're going to see in 2020.
So speaking of 2024, I guess now is a good chance to segue and talk about some of the other things that we're excited to see happen in 2024, or things that we expect we'll be talking about. So, Jason, what are a couple of stories that our podcast is anticipating to be big news in the coming 12 months for our podcast?
Well, I think the first one is Project 8. So based on all the announcements that we've seen thus far, the plan is that Project 8 season is going to be starting about a year from now, in spring of 2025. In fact, I would suspect that based on the timelines that they've talked about, Project 8 training camps will already be in place by the time we do our second anniversary show. So there's got to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen between now and then. There's going to be a lot of news. So I think bringing a pro women's soccer league to Canada is a fantastic development, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm really hopeful that it's all going to come together. But there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been answered yet, and I'm really looking forward to finding out more of what's going on. And I think we're going to be probably talking about it quite a bit next 12 months.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if 2025 really is the year that the league is going to kick off, because the Canadian Premier League went through something very similar, where when it was first announced, the plan was to kick off in 2018. And in early 2018, there still hadn't been that many developments in terms of what cities were going to have clubs, who the coaches and the players were going to be, all of that. So it ended up being postponed, or delayed rather, by 1 year, which I think worked out overall. I mean, no one seems to remember that. I think that it was technically a year late. Maybe Project 8 will go through the same thing, or maybe they will really pull together in the coming months and put together a league on with those 8 teams and all of that. But no, I think you're right that in the next 12 months, it'll be a topic we come back to repeatedly, and we're excited to see impending announcements.
One thing I'll add in about Project 8, which is sort of big picture Project 8, not Calgary specific. I'm not sure if you saw this, Scott, but there is a website that is out there and it's live, and it is talking about, there's a group that's bringing professional women's soccer to Halifax in 2025. And they have a name. It's the Atlantic somethings, and they're looking to hire a CEO and a couple other positions. But in the job description, it mentions that they are joining a Canadian professional league that will have 6 teams in 2025. And it doesn't specify Project 8, but I thought that was an interesting little nugget of information, that apparently the goal is not 8 teams anymore. It sounds like the goal is 6 teams.
Project 6. I don't know.
Actually, I think the reason they called it Project 8 is because that was Diane Matheson's old number. I didn't know that. I thought it was because it was going to be 8 teams, but apparently that's the thought process behind it.
Yeah, Northern Tribune did put out a story about this just a few days ago. So, yeah, you're right. Atlantic Women's FC seems like they already have decent amount of work done, but they still need to reveal their branding. But positive, right? Positive news. So excited. They join Toronto Foothills and Vancouver Whitecaps, so they would be the 4th to tentatively launch. So
yeah, as stuff comes up, in particular with the Calgary perspective, we'll continue to be on top of that news.
Mm-hmm. The other story that we wanted to include in this list of stories to watch in our second year, recently announced there is a new high performance program coming to Calgary for girls who are 15 to 18 years old. We talked about League One Alberta and how that kind of filled a gap in the production pipeline for talented soccer players. This seems to slot in right beneath that. So we're going to be seeing talented female soccer players in their mid to late teens go through this program and then probably progress to League One and then maybe to Project 8 from there or to the national team program or whatever direction the sport takes them. This is new, and the fact that it's female centric is pretty exciting. It adds to Alberta Youth Soccer League, AYSL, which has been around for a little bit now. Just good to see. I think it's starting up pretty soon, like April or something.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a good development as I understand it. And I, right now, if you sort of fall into that age range of, 15, 16 years old, obviously there are some very strong youth sides in the city, but it seems like the cream of the crop right now is usually going to Vancouver to join the Whitecaps. And maybe this program might enable some of the Albertan players that that they won't need to do that. They'll be able to stick with this program, and that might be able to keep them closer to home and still get some really advanced training.
Definitely. So last thing we'd like to talk about to round out this episode is a couple of players who we expect will have, a lot going for them in the next 12 months. Jason, which player would you like to highlight for this little segment?
I think I'll start with the men's side, and we'll talk about Nico Moroniak. So we interviewed him on the podcast actually at the beginning of the year, and I think there are a lot of Calgary players out there of interest, but I really see an interesting future for him ahead. Right now, he's unattached. He likely is going to end up with some team, maybe in the CPL or somewhere else. We don't know yet. So he's likely to have some kind of professional future ahead of him this spring. He's also going to be playing for the Canadian national futsal team that's starting up here in April, and they're going to be off to CONCACAF qualifying. That could be an interesting experience. I don't think we've really had much of a Calgary representation on the futsal team before. And, he was a big piece of that Mount Royal team. So he could potentially end up back in U Sports again this fall. So he's got a lot of different irons in the fire, so to speak. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Yeah, his career just seems to be on such a positive trajectory. And you and I were both really impressed by his interview with us in January. He was well spoken. He was clearly motivated, and I just don't see this guy failing in any aspect of his life, honestly. So I'm expecting a big 2024 season. Curious to see who he plays with. He did have to recover from an injury in 2023, which he said was really the first time he'd had to do something like that. He had a broken collarbone. No, I'm keen to see where he lands because he's only what, 18 still, so
Yeah,
lots of years ahead of him. And I remember when we interviewed him, we asked where he saw himself in 5 years, and it was funny to think that he'll still only be 23 in 5 years. So, and he seemed to have a pretty good roadmap already thought out. So yeah, great choice as a player to look out for in the next 12 months. And finally, from the female side of the sport, I wanted to highlight Kaylee Hunter. We talked about Kaylee quite a lot in the first year of our podcast, but I'm predicting we'll continue to bring her up because similar to Nico, she seems to just have gold in her boots, and she just came off a successful trip to Mexico with Canada's U17 women's national team, scored some goals, including an amazing one. And she's with the Vancouver Whitecaps youth program. So she was another player who was really strong in the League One Alberta inaugural season, at least for part of the season until she made the move to BC. But no, she's really young. I think she's only 15 or 16, somewhere in there. And just seems to have a really bright future ahead of her.
totally. I think there are so many top prospects on the female side of the game from Calgary, but from the conversations we've had with a few people, it seems like she's right at the top of the list right now, and her potential seems to be off the charts. Like so we'll see where she ends up over the next year plus, but definitely everything is tracking in a very positive direction for her, and I agree. We're going to be talking about her a lot more this year, and it'll probably be Whitecaps, League One BC, but also the national team. I think she's going to continue to play for the women's U17 national team, and they're going to be off to the World Cup here later on in the year, and I would expect that she'll be part of that club.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually I forgot to mention it was a hat trick that she got in the CONCACAF Women's Championships. So great tournament from her. And no, like you said, sky's the limit for Kaylee Hunter. I mean, maybe we have a Maya Jones 2.0 on our hand.
It seems that way. So anything else you want to add in right now, Scott? Or I think we've covered a lot of ground here and chatted a lot about the first year of the podcast. Anything else?
No, I think my voice is completely shot, so I should probably call it there. But no, I really enjoyed this last half an hour or so chatting about some of the biggest stories that we discussed on our podcast in the last year, as well as some of the things we expect to be recurring topics and big stories in the next year to come.
For sure. And just on a personal note, Scott, I've really enjoyed doing this podcast with you, and it's been a good year, and I'm looking forward to doing it for a while yet.
Same here.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com for more information about how to subscribe or how to leave a question or comment. You can follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.